again. If this is the first video you're seeing, then you might want to pause, go back, and watch the demo video that I did before this, just so everything makes sense. Or you might not care, and that's fine too. Picking up where we left off, demo is pretty much done. I take the bus to my parents' house for my dad's help to patch this hole that I can't figure out, and to start putting plywood on the walls and the ceiling. But first, before we can even do the floor part, we have to take out this back heater, and he takes out the air conditioning unit for me while I'm out of town visiting my brother. And I come back and we get some more stuff done, and then I take the bus back to where I was living at the time and finish up things on my own. It really starts to come together. It's exciting because we're finally putting things back in. So up until this point, while everything I was doing was very necessary, it made the whole bus look worse and worse and worse and worse. So now it's finally like a possible living space. Since the last video, I have learned a little bit more about video editing and have gained access to better audio, so it'll be easier to see and to hear, hopefully. So enjoy.
Okay, we're jumping right in. This was hard to see in the last video, but there's that heater back there. I decided we're gonna take that out. It was gonna end up being under the bed frame, which was kind of a safety hazard, but also not super useful. So this is a lot of what that looked like. We had to get under the bus and follow the line that it was connected to, make sure it was even possible. Turns out we could actually cap it off, which was best case scenario. So that's what we did. And then we cut through it and drained it before we were able to take the heater out itself. And we needed the heater out before we could patch the hole and finish the subfloor joists. So in case you forgot, this is what the hole looks like. We definitely had our work cut out for us. I'm gonna try to explain to you what we ended up doing without footage of it. So you see here the main problem areas. What we ended up having to do is we got a piece of sheet metal that was bendable, and we morphed it to the little circled hole here. It had to go up the wall a little bit because that's where the rust went. I sprayed spray foam insulation down in that hole, and then we covered it with that metal piece that we custom fit. It took a lot of bending and cutting and adjusting and going back and doing it again. We used JB Weld to hold it down and clamped it. Over that was going to be a much larger piece of sheet metal, which was also going to be JB welded down. Mind you, before we did any of this, we had to angle grind all that rust off best we could, as clean as we could get it, so that it would stick, so that it would last, so that this wasn't all for nothing. Then we put a piece of plywood over the whole thing. We had to cut it to fit, which was its own kind of issue because obviously I was eyeballing the hole when I cut it. So I didn't cut it squared. So we had to cut the wood to fit the hole that I made. Then on top of that, it turns out it wasn't a fully flat surface. So we had to take a router and shave off parts underneath the slab of plywood to fit so that it was flush with the rest of the floor. Here you can kind of see obviously a sped up version of what we're doing, so you can see in the background that little piece of metal that I was talking about and the clamps that I referred to keep the small piece down. In my hand right now is the larger piece, and we're putting JB Weld on it just as much as we can lather on, and then we fit it down, and there goes the plywood. And at this point you see us take it back because that was when we were in the middle of using the router to get it to fit perfectly. So by the end of that day, the second day, we had that hole covered just like this. That extra piece of wood you see is holding it down. You see another piece on the edge in a clamp to put pressure on it so it can dry and hold. And then we got cracking on the walls. So we got this 1/4-inch plywood and cut it into pieces. We divided the ceiling into 4 sections, and then there were 4 top wall sections and 3 bottom wall sections, because the 4th piece was really taken up by that door. So this was the very first 2 pieces of wall. You see the bottom piece of wall and the top piece of wall. Before putting these up, we had to cut them to fit, and I had to angle grind the rust off of the metal pieces behind, which we were gluing them to. But then to get them to dry securely, we have to apply pressure to it, so we used these boards. Those ones on the floor are drilled into the floor. That bottom part of the wall ebbs really badly, so we had to put extra pressure in the middle to get the wood to bend so that it would meet the wall. And from there, it's just section by section. So we did the same thing with one of the ceilings. We cut it to fit, glue it, apply pressure. Obviously here you're fighting gravity, so you want to be extra sure that it's not going to come falling down overnight. All these things took multiple hours apiece to fully dry. And at that point, we were ready to add the other bottom part of wall. But in order to do that, we needed to install electric first, because that's where the outlets were going to be running to. All this wire that you see is wire that we used from the back AC unit that was taken out. Dad had the great idea of using the wire that was just useless wire now to wire the outlets. So here, Dad is fitting the wires through the hole that he's cut through the metal bar. That bottom left is where the source is going to be. So I had to go through every one of these metal rods. He had to drill through every one of those to get a pretty thick bunch of wires through. You will notice this video is very out of chronological order. It would be way too hard to follow to show you chronologically what happened, so I'm just showing you by section. This is what the power source was. So that's an outdoor outlet. You flip it up and I can plug that into a power source to run the bus. So it can be at a campground, outside of a house, to a generator, which is what I'm going to use when I'm not near either of those things, and it'll run to these outlets. So obviously this is after the wall's put in, so not chronological, but this was the finished product. There was one other outlet farther down the bus around the same height, and those are the only 2 that I think I will need. So those are the only 2 that we put in. Then it was time to put the wall up to cover them up. Here we're covering up that part of the wall with some more 1/4-inch plywood. Again, cut to fit, grind off the rust, glue it down, apply pressure, and just wait. So you see those wires, they're just hanging down. We didn't want to cut through them. We don't know what goes to what, so we needed to find a way to house them. Another grand idea from Dad was to custom cut these kind of pegs at the corners of where the wall meets the ceiling, with a hole in the back for them to run through all together. So he cut all of these out for me, and I took them back to where I was living and installed the rest of them by myself. I also installed the rest of the ceiling, the rest of the walls. After all the wall ceiling corners were secure, then we had cut out these long strips of the 1/4-inch plywood, and here I drilled them in, but then I also glued them, and I insulated behind those before I put them up. I did not forget about the back AC unit. I misspoke earlier. The thing that Dad took down while I was out of town is this white thing behind it. We couldn't figure that out, and it houses all those wires, just a bunch of wires. But the AC unit itself, we took out together. This thing ended up being super heavy and very connected to a lot of things that we were afraid to cut through. But we figured it out. So we're tucking all those wires in there. There's gonna be a shelf there that actually currently isn't made yet. So after this, we insulated those back walls where those curves are, which were a real pain to cover because obviously the angle. But like anything else, we figured it out. We custom measured, took a lot of tries. There are wooden anchors similar to the bars that house the wires behind these things to hold them up, obviously, and those are connected to the metal. There was a lot of cutting through metal and custom fitting in this project. So this morning I was going to get to work on the floor of the bus, and I just decided that I'm done for now because I'm moving in a couple days,
and I'd rather just clean it and start packing it up. Also, please enjoy 3 different times yesterday morning that I was cutting through metal and things flew out at my face. Anyway, a bunch of people have been asking how it's going. So I've already started loading a few things in, but I figured I'd just go ahead and show you what we have. This wall is pretty much done. This wall is pretty much done. It's covered by this extra sheet of plywood that I'm going to use for the back. And then the ceiling is also done. So, made a lot of progress. I didn't get to the floor, and that's just how it is. And that's okay. So, that's where we're at. We got 2 outlets. There's one. The other one's over here. It needs a little patching up, but good progress. So, it's a good stopping place because right after this, I move. I use the bus to move my stuff, and then it lives at my parents' house and is still currently living at my parents' house because where I moved to is closer to them. So, and I couldn't park it at the place I was moving to. Works out because Dad's workshop is at his house and he's still helping me out a lot. So hopefully in the next video I'll be able to get you all up to date with what's currently going on. Until then, enjoy these 2 videos and stay tuned for the next one. They'll hopefully be up soon. We'll see what happens. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye!